Why do you think that he took care of her and everything? Why do you think?
Because she had her own aspirations, ambitions, and
This movie is one of the greatest love stories of all time.
I loved every scene that Eleanor was in.
And she's a powerful, powerful monarch in her own right. There's something about Henry II that you need to know that they didn't bring out in the movie, and that is Henry II instituted common law into the parlance of the world.
Hi, welcome to The Real Generation Gap. I'm BJ King.
I'm Fred Satilli.
And the movie we're reviewing today is The Lion in Winter, where dungeons solve marriage problems. It's a historical drama about King Henry II and his family battling for the throne on one Christmas in 1183.
Well, I have a lot to say about this movie, so I want you to start. I want you to tell me what you think about it.
Okay. Right off the bat, this movie was giving me... So a couple of things I want to cover. This is a movie that's based off of a play, right? This is like an adapted screenplay, I believe.
Right.
The movie is based off of, I forget his name, something Goldman, John Goldman, I believe.
And the winner is James Goldman for The Lion in Winter.
And immediately what this movie sort of reminded me of was kind of like Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, because it is a dramatic retelling of a real historical event, but the events in it are not like 100% historical. It's like you don't really know exactly what happened, but you sort of fill in the lines to make a really great, to make a grand narrative about what's going on.
Right, and the king, he even mentions King Lear.
Yeah.
In the movie, he says, I also had three. He goes, I can't divide my kingdom into three like King Lear did. And I don't know if you've ever read King Lear or seen it or anything like that, but it is an equally atrocious story. He's got three daughters who are all diabolical, and they all do horrible stuff, and he can't believe it. He thinks every one of them loves him and they'll support him, but they don't, And here we have a king who's got three sons. And he's hoping for one of them to ascend to the throne, but none of them are quite cutting it, are they?
Yeah, no.
So what do you have to say about that?
What was kind of interesting to me was I was drawing a little bit of some parallels. We were talking about The Godfather before we were shooting, and I was drawing a little bit of parallels to it because you had Joffrey, who I believe is he's not the eldest. He's
the middle one.
He's the middle child, right?
Right.
I know. You know, I know. I know, you know, I know. We know Henry knows, and Henry knows we know it. We're a knowledgeable family.
You have Joffrey, who is he's the more scheming and conniving and more clever one of the bunch. He's...
And where did he get that ability?
From his mother.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And he reminded me a little bit of Michael from The Godfather.
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Then you had Richard, who is based off of Sir Richard the Lionheart, which was very cool. Right. He's more of the brute. He's more passionate and
consummate
hot-headed.
soldier.
Yes.
Right.
And that was reminding me sort of Sonny from The Godfather. And then you had John, who is 100% the Fredo of the family. He's spineless. He's a little slimy. And he's very much not clever, nor is he strong.
What a great analogy and synopsis. So do you think when they wrote The Godfather, do you think Mario Puzo,
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Because that parallel is really on the money.
I think The Godfather might have come out... around the exact same time as this, because this came out in 1968, and then the play was written in 1966. I believe The Godfather was either already being written or was already written, because that was also based off of a book first.
Right, it was written before the movie, so you're right about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but I saw those parallels there, and I thought it was kind of interesting to see that once again, and it makes for a really great family dynamic because you have this really diverse, unique cast of characters where none of them feel, none of them have to rely on another character to be their own, which was...
They were super individuals.
Yes, they were.
And isn't it interesting that three boys close in age can be brought up in the same environment and be so different It just goes to show you how individual people really are. You're not just a victim of your environment or anything. You're not just a product of your environment, right? There's something in you that's unique.
That was something that was also really interesting about the movie, is that it's a very much like kind of a character study into a lot of these, characters, and they're based off of historical figures, kings and queens, and usually people like that become sort of legendary in history. You hear a lot about their their conquests and their successes and how they ruled, but really what they were like behind the brick and mortar of their castles can be a bit of a mystery.
That's what I want to get into.
Yeah.
And we're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think the character who was probably my favorite was Eleanor of Antiquaine, I believe.
Aquitaine.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This takes place in France. Chinon is in France. They're not in England.
Okay.
The castle where they are, and where she is imprisoned. Yeah, that's in France. Mm-hmm. He had conquered France at the age of 21.
That was an interesting factor to me. There was that were you just allowed to put your own queen in the dungeon and no one just bats an eye about it? Is that just a normal thing that happened back then?
You don't understand what it is to be a king. When you're a king, you do whatever you want. Absolutely. In this particular case, the only other person that he had to consider who he did not consider was the Pope, who is a king in his own right.
Yeah.
Now, he trotted his wife out for certain events, right? Public appearances and that. He didn't kill his wife, and we're going to talk about that. But he had to get rid of her. And why do you... Well, boy, I want to get off to the races on this so much. Why do you think that he took care of her and everything? Why do you think?
Because she had her own aspirations, ambitions, and sort of difference of, at least from my understanding, a difference of how the country should be ruled.
She brought armies to bear against his armies.
Yeah.
Right? Why would you keep somebody like that around? Wouldn't it be better to eliminate that little piece of competition?
Yeah. Maybe. Possibly.
She was married to Louis in France, the king, right?
Yes, that was...
And then she saw him and dumped the other one.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure how you do that back then, but it was remarkable, right? And she had a lot of children too, right? She had daughters and stuff too. Mm-hmm. They mention this in the movie, right? Yeah. Wasn't it interesting that she gave her son knives with which to kill their father?
I'm not sure if she gave them knives, because at the very end,
the three in the box, three knives.
Well, at the very end, she's rather surprised that her sons are going to turn to become assassins. It's something very sort of slimy, and it's funny because that's that part where it almost feels like it'll turn into Julius Caesar, because they're about to stab their father, but it was also a very intense scene there. There's a lot of emotion and weight behind every scene, including even those ones.
Yeah. And why is there all that emotion? Why is it?
Well, for one, terrific writing. The lines that they said throughout the entire movie were honestly super well written, and I was kind of eating it up.
Yeah, each scene is wow.
Yeah.
Wow, they make these philosophical points all along, don't they?
Yeah. What I was honestly most impressed by was just how much each line of dialogue really shows portrays the character in their fullest form of who they are. I loved every scene that Eleanor was in, because she would say things. Because when there's a certain scene where Henry and Eleanor are fighting, and Eleanor says that I still adore you, and the king says, out of all the lies you told me, that's the one I hate the most. And she says, I know, that's why I've saved it last. And I was
right. Yeah. But back a moment ago, the scene that was up was Philip. Okay, yeah. There's Philip. He's the king of France. He's 20 years old.
Current. Yep.
Right? These people, they die at 50.
Yeah.
Right? So he's the king of France. And here he's plotting with Geoffrey. Now, Geoffrey was the middle son. Mm-hmm. And in real life, he died before the king. Mm-hmm. So he had no potential to become the king, even though he had schemed away where he was the last man standing. Mm-hmm. This son has betrayed you. That son has betrayed you. All you have left. Right? And the king was like, we're not doing this through logic. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, Richard was obviously the one to be king. He was a soldier, and he was a self-assured man. The youngest brother, John, was an idiot. He was Fredo.
Yeah,
right?
he was the Fredo.
Incapable of it. But you know that both those guys did become king. Richard became the king. He was the successor. And then when I believe, I could be wrong about this, put it in the comments. I believe he was killed in combat.
Richard?
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Good.
Was killed in
Okay.
combat.
Yeah. Okay. Forget about the comments. So anyway, and then John was the successor. He became the king, right? They had the idiot king.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to talk about this movie from a little bit different perspective.
Okay.
Okay. This movie is one of the greatest love stories of all time. This man, the king, loves the queen, and he can't deny that, even though he may vocally deny it. When she gets deep enough in despair, he holds her. At one point, he tells her everything's going to be okay. She's, I don't know what to do, and he realizes that she's running strategy, and he's running strategy. And then she says, I don't want to lose you. They're not living together. She's in jail, right? She's in a convent. She's in a very comfortable jail, but nonetheless, this is how their relationship is so volatile that they can't live together. They have irreconcilable differences, right? But when it comes right down to it, even though there's young and beautiful girls and everything, there's nobody like her. She owns him. No matter what he does, way in the background, she owns him.
That's why she says, like, can't you feel the chains? Like, he's
right,
chained
yes,
to
can't
him.
you? Right. She tells him that she owns him. And he her. So these are two people. They're heavy-duty intellectuals. They're both very big deal philosophers. They're highly intelligent, both of them, and they're strapped with a dopey family and the dopey subjects. And the two of them are on a different level than everybody else in the story. They can't do without each other because they're intellectual equals. They're the only one that they have that they can really talk to on that level. And she's a powerful, powerful monarch in her own right.
Yeah.
She was the owner of the Aquitaine. And she went in jail. She passed it on. The Aquitaine is the most fertile, rich farmland and everything in France. If you own that, you can feed the army. That's why it's valuable. Mm-hmm. And she inherited that, So she passed it to Richard so he could rule it because she was in no position to do that, and then he wouldn't give it back. She says, "I'm going to have my soldiers," and he says, "Those are mine now. You're not getting them back." Right? He's a greedy kid.
Yeah.
Now, he is groomed by her to be her successor. He's her animal. He's her dog. Mm-hmm. Right? When he was a kid, she was with him. The other one she didn't spend much time with, but she spent a lot of time with him.
I believe you're talking about Richard, right?
Yes.
I believe Richard was the son of her prior marriage to, which
Louis.
I thought was interesting. Louis, yeah.
To Louis, right, the king of France. And right, so how could he ascend to the throne? Mm-hmm. There were women that were queens in those times that two different kings slept with them on alternate nights so they wouldn't know who the son was in case one of those kings lost power or died. The other king could claim that heir. Mm-hmm. I know this may sound unbelievable to you, but this is historically recorded, that this is what goes on. So there's something about Henry II that you need to know that they didn't bring out in the movie, and that is Henry II instituted common law into the parlance of the world, into the he had the first king to have a legislature. His law was, you do what you say you're going to do. It's a contract. If you say you're going to do this, you do it. And you don't encroach on anybody. You don't steal from anybody. You don't cheat anybody. You don't kill anybody. You don't encroach. The word was encroachment back then. And this is the beginning of common law. Now, there are two forms of law that exist in reality. One of them you cannot create. You discover it. They discovered the law of gravity. It's not legislated, right? The sun is going to go down in the night and it's going to come up in the morning. No ruler can alter that. There are things that you discover in life. When when people began tribal existence, they said, when you kill people, there's always bad consequences. And when you steal from people, there's always bad consequences. These are natural laws. If you steal from somebody, that person's going to want get back, right? If you kill somebody, his family's going to want get back. These are natural laws. Love is something that no one fully understands. These two people are stuck with each other. They're bonded to each other through a natural force like gravity, something that they cannot repeal. They're stuck with it. We're stuck with gravity. Everybody on earth has got to obey gravity. It's a law that you discover. So natural laws, the laws of God, if you want to put it that way, are things that man can only discover. The rest of the stuff is all crap. Statutes, rules, those are legislated. Those are political laws. Those are something that somebody in power wants to control people. And usually it's a vehicle for taxation. So these two intellectuals, they're going through life. One of my favorite scenes is the sons pull the knife on their father. And their mother says, it's treason. Execute them. You have to execute them. That's treason. Mm-hmm. And he says, all right. And he lifts the sword, but he can't do it because now natural law is enforced. Statutory law is they must be executed. But the law of nature is you don't kill your kids.
Yeah.
You don't have to. And he says, I can't do it. And she says, nobody thought you could. So that's discovery of natural law.
That was what was probably the most compelling part of like the story to me was like the interactions between these family members, because they all have their political ambitions and their plans for how they can ascend the throne or essentially influence a larger get their influence over a large amount of authority, but they have this like undeniable love for each other, even though they have literal knives to each other's throats. And this movie really had me asking the questions like, does love make you strong or does love make you weak?
See, that's a natural law thing, right? He at one point says, I want no women in my life. Well, he's sleeping with everybody every night. He's loves nothing more than my life is destroyed because I had this lust for women all the time. Now, so these two intellectuals, they're discovering natural law. This guy instituted in England, natural law, God's law, common law, right? Mm-hmm. There's certain things that you do and you don't do, and you're compelled. You have no choice. It's God's law, right? It's not some stupid magistrate made a tax law. The other hero of that story is Alice. And Alice wants nothing more. Look at her. Right? As if there was a girl that looked like that then. She wants nothing more in this whole wide world than to marry the king. She was the queen's handmaiden, and the queen loves her. The queen raised her. Mm-hmm. She was her servant. She called her Gentle Alice. Oh, Gentle Alice, how's the king doing? I know you're sleeping with him. That's fine.
But now she's a rival in that sense.
Yet, but how, by, you know what I mean? By what measure? The queen is rooting for her. The queen, she still loves her. She raised her. So the king gets really furious. Everybody's betraying him. He's just, the whole thing's going to hell in a handbasket. And he says, everybody's going to jail. And he puts the three sons in jail. Put them in the dungeon. Now they're in the dungeon. He says to the girl, well, this is it. He says, you and me, we're going to Italy. We're going to meet the Pope. We're going to get married. This is what she wants more than anything in the world. And she says, well, what about the queen and her sons? He says, they're in prison. I put them in prison. She says, you have to let them out. You can never let them out. She says, if you put them in prison and you do this, marry me with the Pope, you will never be able to get them out because they will never stop trying to kill you. Mm. Right? They're going to raise armies. And everybody who loved the queen is going to be against you, right? And lots of people love the queen. They're in France. It's Eleanor of Aquitaine, right? The French, the people all around them love her. So her love of the king, I can't let you make this mistake. You see how heavy expression of love that is from her?
I would actually disagree. I would not find Alice to be a hero of this story. I would find her more to be of a tragic character, because she begins the story as this girl who's just in love with the king, and all she wants to do is be with him and to serve him. And there's a really interesting piece of dialogue between Eleanor and Alice where Eleanor exchanges words with Alice, and she says, I was once like you when I was your age, but after years of being with the king and probably years of going through this very complicated and complex thing called love, I became this simultaneous maniacal, scheming, but also very gentle and also sarcastic and witty woman. A very complex character, where Alice is very much, her desires are very simple. And that scene that you're describing, where she begins to say that he has to keep his sons all in the dungeon. That's her first moment where she begins to show that conniving and scheming nature there, where she begins to have her descent, or maybe even ascension into a maturity, much like Eleanor did.
Right. She is now growing.
Yeah.
She is now recognizing natural law. Henry, you're going to do something that you're going to regret. You're going to do something that's not going to turn out well. This is not good for you. It's good for me. I want to marry you. She's going to give up her dream to make everything good for him. You see where she ascends? You see where she recognizes natural law? It's an amazingly heroic moment for her. She has to turn now. She has to mature. She can't be the baby now. Just like in The Godfather, right? The Godfather says a man has to be careful. Women and children can be careless. Now she is put in this position where she's not going to be loved by the people of France. She's the other woman, right? Everybody who loved Eleanor, all her subjects, they're not going to accept her. And these other guys have armies and all that. It's an amazingly maturing moment for her. She has to slam the brakes on her own simple desire, the way you put it, right? She's got this simple desire. She's a simple girl. And she can be at that point, because he's not going to make this gigantic mistake. But when he's going to make this gigantic mistake, she becomes the adult in the room. She schools him. You're making a mistake. This is wrong. You can't do this. This isn't going to turn out well. You got to release them right away. This is a tactical mistake. I think it's fantastically heroic. I mean, she totally transcends from the stupid little girl to now she's queen material, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that about the movie.
I interpreted the movie a little differently when it came to how the love and the relationships play into effect, because you have all these people here who are definitely seeking. You have a family here, a very tight family, a close family, who are all seeking this love towards one another. But there's been so much that has happened between this family where they've all been hurt by each other in their pursuit of love for each other, that they've become jaded and they have these walls up and they've become defensive. So you have this instinct after being hurt so many times when searching for love, that you just want to do what makes you feel safe and comfortable, and you're trying to play towards a position where you will feel comfortable. So for Alice, for me, that moment was not heroic, but that was her first moment where she tries to lean more into that manipulative nature that Eleanor has throughout the movie, where she tries to sort of manipulate the king into cementing this, because you're right, she does know that locking up all of his sons is not the right thing to do, but she says, well, if you're going to do it, then you're going to have to do it. But you know that her motivation is, well, if we go through this plan, I can finally be with him, and the price is that he has to lock up all of his sons, but I will finally get what I want. Because throughout the entire movie, Alice is sort of subject to the wills of everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Henry wants her to marry John, but he will still have her in a way. But that
he says so.
Yeah,
he says, well, she'll still live in the thing, and I'll do with her what I want.
Mm-hmm. But then Eleanor has her own plans for Alice as well. And this whole movie, she's being kind of like, she says it herself, she's in a land of queens and kings and knights, and yet she's the only pawn.
Right.
And
another great line.
Exactly. And her only desire is to just want to be with the king, is to get this love. But in the pursuit of this love, she's gotten so hurt so many times and used and manipulated that she begins to take it into her own hands to start playing their game a little bit. To get what she wants, she learns that she has to start playing their game a little bit. So from there, it's more of like a loss of innocence, that she realizes that, love is a lot harder to get.
Maturity is a loss of innocence.
And it's like the battle between this family to me was like, all of them are pursuing this love from each other, but it's contentious with this callousness that has been built up when they've been hurt prior, in prior experiences trying to pursue that love. Especially like you have Richard and Eleanor, who's that mother-son bond is so strained, and Richard is very much like, I don't love you, I don't care for you, and he says to her,
which is just the purest of lies.
He says to her in another great line. He says, "You're incomplete. All the human parts of you are missing." And I thought, I was like, what a dagger of a thing to say to your own mother. And she gets so frustrated, but it's also manipulative, that she takes like a hairpin out of her hair, and she says, "Okay, you want my land? Let's write a contract right here." And she slices her arm, and his instinct to comfort his mother jumps in, and he goes, "Mother, why would you do that?" And she goes, "Oh, so you did love me the whole time." And she's comforted by it. And I thought, what a complex.
We call that a bitch move. Yeah. Fake suicide, right? Like how many women slash their wrists but they don't make it, and then
Well, it's like, it's not just like women, but like any like person who's really that desperate to like reach out to love from someone, but they've also simultaneously calloused from their own like machinations. It's like it's a move that all the characters sort of do throughout the movie that's similar to that.
It's like hugging somebody with knight in armor.
Yeah.
Right? Like you got armor and you hug the other person with armor. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody's super cynical. I love at one moment where Henry says, well, your sons all want to kill you, to take the throne. He says, that makes him a good king. They're supposed to think of that. That's the kind of strength you need to be the king, And it's the same thing with Alice. She suddenly shows the strength. Boy, that's a tough one. She suddenly shows the strength. She has a strong moment. Mm-hmm. And now like I said before, she becomes the adult in the room, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She says, "You're out of your mind now. You're lashing out. You're acting like a jerk. You put your sons in. You can't live with that. They'll destroy you. I don't want a destroyed king. Because her whole concept of being with him is going on a picnic. That's what she wants to do.
At the beginning of the movie, that was bliss to her. That was what she wanted.
Right. She doesn't want to become part of the royal family. She doesn't want to be, carrying a dagger in her shirt everywhere.
And that's another scene that's also like, that was funny when Richard pulls a dagger on John in Eleanor's chambers, and John yells out, "He has a dagger. He's a knife." She goes, "We all have knives."
Well, I told you before we watched this, that was my favorite line in the whole movie. She says, "We're all armed. It's 1833 and we're barbarians."
It's not only that, but that line has more than like...
She said there, with that Connecticut accent, "We're barbarians."
That was another aspect that Katharine Hepburn won an Oscar for this movie. She won Best Actress, and this is probably... To me, this was probably the role where 100% usually it's like it's a lot harder and difficult for me to really determine when a person really deserves an Oscar. Right. I'm not a professor in that sort of field, but in this movie, 100% this was a movie I felt that someone really deserved an Oscar. She perfectly encapsulates this person who is super complex as simultaneously, maniacal, scheming,
the
conniving,
looks on her face,
cold and cruel, but also somehow gentle and sweet and caring and desperate as well. It's like, how can you be someone so powerful and have so much manipulation and influence and yet come off so desperate, but also come off as someone who can also give so much? And
right. So the balance, right? Sometimes they say having balls in the air or plates spinning, like you got a lot of... She had everything going at once, 100 balls in the air, 100 spinning plates. She's just trying to do everything all at once, and so is he.
Yeah, and Katharine Hepburn delivered every line perfectly.
And so did Peter O'Toole.
Yeah, Peter O'Toole. I would say all of them all of them did. The only person I would really, I wasn't as impressed with their performance was Jane Marrow as As Alice, she was a bit off to the side, and it's not that she did a bad job. She was just overshined by
Right, and
the
Prince
other
Philip
cast.
also.
Yeah.
Which, who knew that Timothy Dalton would one day be James Bond? But look, a young, and he had the same problem as everybody. Henry called him boy all through the thing because he was 20 and Henry was 50, right?
Yeah.
Look, boy, I'm not a boy, I'm the king. Right, boy, listen. He wasn't having it. He couldn't, no matter what, he couldn't get respect. And that was a big power struggle. And they had moments in there where one time where King Henry said, "You've told me your entire plan and I've told you nothing. Do you understand that I won this conversation? I got what I wanted, you got nothing. I'm going to bed now. You're not a king yet. You don't know how to negotiate."
Those scenes like those were like really great because the way that they portray all the emotions that, like, there's an opening scene where I think Jeffrey is watching this sort of battle, and it's just a slow pan in on his face where you could see that you could see the gears working, and that there's something about this guy where you can simultaneously see sort of what he's thinking, but also know absolutely nothing about what he's thinking, and that is something that is really impressive to capture,
Right.
in acting, and that scene was one of many where you go into this with a sort of a false pretense. Like, another scene that I really liked that was like that was with Eleanor and King Henry. I love all the scenes that include Eleanor and King Henry, where Henry says that he wants an annulment, and he starts off shouting and yelling at her, and then Eleanor then begins to sort of silently bite back with things that really get under his skin, and then she tenders him up. And then when they're back on the floor together and they're close together, she then goes, "So no annulment?" And he goes, It was just a whim." And before you even know it, you've also already fallen into Eleanor's trap. She was planning from the very beginning of the conversation exactly how to get him to reverse what he said. And by the time you get there, you've already fallen for it. You've already, she's already sprung her trap and you're caught. And I was like, that is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a masterpiece moment.
Yeah.
It really is. And you see that he's hugging her then. Because she got so, he's like, he doesn't mind arguing with her, but he doesn't want her to be genuinely unhappy.
Yeah.
And when she becomes to the point where she's like, doesn't know what to do next, like, as long as she's fighting, he'll fight. But when she gets to where, like, now what do I do? That's when he, look, you're it's going to be, and he's hugging her, right? And he's comforting her.
But another scene is when is like exactly right after proceeding directly after that sort of tender moment that they have on the ground, they go straight into another tirade, like another big argument. But she's still manipulating him then, and and you can tell that he's simply someone who's he loves her, but he is way too proud to be able to tell
he's
her.
The king.
Yeah, he's way too proud to tell her that he loves her, and he's also probably too proud to see it for himself. But like, when he goes to storm out and he says, "I'll raise 1,000 men," and she starts to say things like, "Do you ever wonder if I slept with your father?" Immediately he turns around and she knows exactly what button to press. And then, but she's subtly sort of leading him to the bed as well, which was another sort of subtle aspect of this is a very complex romance and relationship here. She's literally describing this sort of entanglement that she had with his father, while also simultaneously inviting him to bed, which I'm not sure if that's going to go into the video, but...
Why not? There's nothing wrong with saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was just a masterful manipulation, but also simultaneously a desperate plea to just love me.
Would you recommend this movie to people?
I would recommend it. Immediately after I saw this movie, I recommended it to my girlfriend.
Yeah. That goes without saying.
I was actually texting her as I was watching the movie, kind of describing her to scenes.
You should have watched it with her.
Yeah.
You really should have. And the greatest part, and we won't do the spoiler alert. We won't do the spoiler, but in a million years, you would have never guessed that ending, would you?
No, I would not have.
Not in a million years.
I would not.
And that was the greatest truth, right? That was the naked truth then.
That's another aspect I want to highlight is the music in this movie. Usually, I feel like older movies, especially about a subject like this, the movie can be a bit generic when it comes to fanfare or orchestral. especially when they're sort of like from a historical time period where they're trying to really make it seem legendary. That's how I kind of felt with The Man Who Was King, that the music to me was a little generic in the orchestral, and it was triumphant, but it was not necessarily unique. But in this one, it's definitely unique. I love the sort of Latin chanting that's going on, especially in that scene where King Henry is debating about killing Richard with his sword, and he's raising his sword, and you have that like,
Yeah, it's like The Exorcist.
he's like and it's like all that Latin chanting going on. It made it so dramatic and also like really dark in that scene.
Yeah, well, music was dark then, you know. So anyway, well, I'm glad that you enjoyed the movie, and I'm glad that you were shocked by the ending, and I'm glad that you would recommend this to people, because this is a study on relationship. I mean, but I just want to reiterate, this is the king that discovered common law. Really were their whole life, and it's borne out at the end, you know. Their whole life, they're searching for the meaning of life. They're searching for the meaning of their own life. When he says, "I wish we could live forever," because they want to find out, you know, how to deal with all these problems, and it's going to take forever to do that. It's so provocative. It's so philosophical and thought-provoking, and to know that in real life, that this guy literally is the author of common law, you know. Mm-hmm. So obviously, as far as rating goes, you know, it's a 10 for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's an absolute masterpiece in every regard.
How I would describe this movie, like my final thoughts on this movie, is it's a movie about a family who are all extremely desperate to reach out and connect and like love one another, but they've been so calloused and sort of hurt by, you know, the traps that they've sprung for each other and the plans that they've fallen.
The power struggle.
Yeah, the power struggle, the power struggle and the ambitions of one another. It's like the closer they come together, the more they bump into each other, and they get bruised and they get hurt, and so they become calloused. And yet they continue to be so desperate to connect to one another. And it's a very extremely complex but beautifully captured image of this family who deeply loves each other, but is also deeply toxic towards one another.
Well stated.
Yeah, and so I really enjoyed this movie. I would honestly say I would genuinely say it's worth watching just to see Katharine Hepburn's performance as Eleanor. She really made the whole movie for me, and so I would also give it a 10 out of 10. I actually really love the movie.
That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Fred. This is probably out of all the movies you recommended on the show, this one is probably my favorite.
Well,
best one you've recommended to me so far.
I'm really happy to hear that. Okay. All right. Go ahead and give us an outro when you're ready.
All right. Thank you for watching The Real Generation Gap. I just want to say I really recommend this movie. It's a really beautiful, like I said, a really beautiful capturing of how complex love can really be sometimes. And, you know, how about you let me know down in the comments. Do you think love makes you stronger or makes you weaker after watching this movie? So, you know, make sure you leave a comment down below and make sure you join us again next time. Thank you.